Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on whether you're watching us in real time or forever in the future as a podcast. This is Meanwhile Here on Earth. I am your host, Peter Robbins, and we have two guests tonight, both who have become good friends over the past few years. And sometimes you just figure this will be a really interesting conversation if I have this person and this person. And having that power in this radio world, we're going to do it. My guests today are Reverend Michael J.S. Carter and Eric Mintel. Reverend Carter is originally from Baltimore, Maryland. He moved to New York City in 1980 and lived there for 27 years, working as a professional actor before moving to Asheville, North Carolina, which is his current home. He is an ordained interfaith minister and received his BA degree in letters from the College of New Rochelle, graduating cum laude. Michael received his Masters in Divinity Degree from Union Theological Seminary in New York City. He served as a staff chaplain, that's board certified, at Lenox Hill Hospital, Beth Israel Hospital, Beth Israel Cancer Center, Methodist Hospital, and New York Hospital in Queens. While serving various Unitarian Universalist congregations in New York, Michael was trained as an anti-racism trainer and recognized for his efforts by President Clinton. He was also a weekly columnist for the Asheville Citizen-Times and written for numerous other newspapers and magazines as well. A longtime UFO contactee, his book, Ancient Scriptures, Extraterrestrials, and the Holy Bible, was #1 on Amazon's list of UFO-related books in 2014. He has appeared on George Norrie's Coast to Coast radio show and on Norrie's TV show, Beyond Belief. Also as a regular guest on Midnight in the Desert with host Heather Wade. He has appeared on Academy Award-winning actress Shirley MacLaine's radio show, as well as author Whitley Strieber's show Unknown Country, here on Extra Network. Reverend Carter spoke at UFO conferences across the nation as a regular consultant to the History Channel's Ancient Aliens series, and features in the UFO documentary The Real 440, and in Steven Spielberg's Sci-Fi Channel documentary Abduction Diaries, which was the precursor to Spielberg's HBO series Taken, which I had a tiny role in working on. Author Whitley Strieber calls Reverend Carter's first book, Alien Scriptures, Extraterrestrials, and the Holy Bible, the best book ever written on the topic. Michael is also the author of A New World If You Can Take It, God, Extraterrestrials, the Metaphysics of Spiritual Healing and the Power of Affirmative Prayer, and Enlightenment, among other titles. Michael is on the advisory board of the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, also called FREE. He also continues to serve as a minister for the Unitarian Universalist congregation of I'm mispronouncing it again already, Michael, Swannanoa Valley, located in this beautiful mountains of Western North Carolina, and as a consulting minister for the Thermal Belt Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Tryon, North Carolina. Since 2016, Eric Mintel has led Eric Mintel Investigates, an extraordinary show which seeks out strange stories to share with his audiences, be the stories about ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, or dogmen, among other anomalies. Eric and his team are outstanding investigators. However, he lives a double life. For more than 30 years, Eric has been an acclaimed jazz musician performing with his group, the Eric Mintel Quintet. He was invited to perform at the White House in 1998 at the request of President Clinton, and again in 2011 for President Obama. He has been invited also to perform at the Kennedy Center on more than 10 occasions. In 2010, he performed at a special conference at the United Nations and otherwise toured and performed all over the country in concert halls, high schools, libraries, elementary schools, churches, I can attest to that one, jazz clubs, and other locations and venues. He has also been the subject of many write-ups in numerous newspapers and featured many interviews on radio shows and podcasts, both here and abroad. And he is the author of Eric Mintel Investigates, Casebook Investigations 2016. Reverend Michael Carter, Non-Reverend Eric Mintel, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. Again.
It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure. Peter, how are you?
Oh my God, I love it.
I need a nap.
Yes.
I mean, how can we live up to that? I mean, how can we go on?
You guys.
I know. You hear that and you go, I wonder who he's talking about. Is that really?
You've both been engaged with presidents on different levels.
Yes.
And that reminds me, when I was working early in the 90s on Left at East Gate, former Attorney General Ramsey Clark very kindly volunteered to assist my co-author and I with some particulars. And he was doing it completely pro bono, and I was in heaven visiting his office, and here's a great man who I admired since I was young. And he said, leave this with me and I'll have an answer for you or just some comments in about 3 weeks. Call back, speak to his secretary, right through to Mr. Clark. You'll have to forgive me. Not long after I spoke to you, the president called me, it would have been Clinton, and asked me to go on a certain mission to Haiti. And I thought, this is the only time in my life when somebody is going to use as an excuse that the president of the United States wanted to do something and so they couldn't get, I thought. So, yeah, you guys both have pretty classy credentials.
Well, you do, and you do too. They called the right guy. So there you go.
Yes.
Thank you. There is so much to discuss hypothetically in this crazy world of ours as it's rolling along on its axis at an increasing speed. In the world of UFO studies, which is obviously an interest of all of ours, the last few years have accelerated public, I don't even know if it's interest, it's more comfortable interest. This is at some point in the last half dozen plus years, it became a non-outsider topic, something I wasn't sure I would ever live to see. Of course, there are aspects that will remain completely verboten as far as even discussing in official circles like abduction and hybrids and all manner of unsettling aspects of that area of study. But with the legitimacy granted to civilization by the fact that the House of Representatives of the United States Congress has been looking into this and hearing what various individuals, including that category of people, some of whom have gone on to become absolute celebrities and personalities over the years, whistleblowers. We live in a different world as far as UFO studies, and we now have a new and very different American governmental administration. Do either one of you have either a gut sense of whether this administration is going to be paying particular attention to this subject or moving it along at any fast pace, or what we might expect to see over the next year or so as this soap opera kabuki play sincere effort in the House continues on? Michael, your thoughts?
It's a great question. We were talking before, Eric, you came on, and the word blitzkrieg came up. And Peter brought that word up, but I used it yesterday because and so great minds, and I optics is everything now. And I don't know if this administration and timing is everything. I feel that this administration will push this forward. I really, really do. If no more than for the optics of it. But I think that it will only go so far. I don't know if you saw the YouTube interview with Hayam Mashed a few weeks ago when he came
I
out
didn't.
and said he's the brigadier general, the retired brigadier general for Israeli space security. And he said that Trump knows about all of this stuff, but he can't come out and say it. Now, is that news for us? Probably not, because we know that presidents have to have some type of plausible deniability and what have you. But I think with what's going on, the optics will look like that this will be the most progressive administration as far as disclosure goes. I just feel that way.
Well, that'd be interesting to see how it plays out, of course. Eric, any intuition on how things may roll along in the next either
Yeah,
administration or year or two?
yeah. Like Michael just said, I think possibly. Again, I'm not holding out hope as far as that goes because you know how it is, and you just said it. They only go so far. They only go so far with the disclosure. Because then it's masked with something else. I remember Bill Clinton, not when we were at the White House, but I remember him saying that, when he became president, he realized right away that there was a government within a government. So you're right. He probably has all this knowledge, and the presidents have had all this knowledge of all these things. But I look at it this way. I look at least the government, and they're having these hearings, and they're saying, hey, folks, the UFOs you're seeing are real. We just don't know what they are. It's at least making us that comfortable, which you just mentioned. We're in a comfortable environment where people are telling their story. And I don't care who it is. Everybody has had some kind of paranormal experience, whether it's ghosts, UFOs, or whatever, that they can't explain, But I think we're in a great period right now because everything is ramped up to the point of it's a hot topic right now. So
Yeah.
if this administration wants to push that through, then great, let's get some answers. Let's at least get some truthful kinds of answers here, in the dynamic world that we're in, because we all know we've all had our own experiences that we can't deny. They happened. So I think that discussion, I think you need to hear from more people, not just government officials. I think there's got to be probably a whole new faction of people coming forward pushing this through. And I think you're going to, and that's where the whistleblowers come in. You've got the Navy pilots. So I think you're going to have a lot more people in the scientific world now. They're even coming forward because 10 years ago, would we even be talking about this? It was like 15 years ago, it was taboo to even talk about. But now there is such an open-mindedness to it. It's a good period to be in. I know the world's chaotic, but it's this particular, what we're in right now in this bubble of paranormal activity. And I think that's where we're getting closer to the truth. And I hope it pushes through.
I'd like to just jump in just very
Please.
quickly. What concerns me is the militarization of the whole narrative. I tip my hat to the whistleblowers for all the obvious reasons. But what's happening, and well, we'll see how far it goes on. It's like unless you are in military intelligence or maybe a commercial pilot or what have you, you are controlling the narrative. There's no, the average folk, who have seen these beings or maybe interacted and got messages or what have you. That's not even in the picture anymore. And I remember, I forget the new admiral who's talking about it, Gallaudet, if you know I'm talking, I know you do by face. And I remember listening to him, and he's specializing in the underwater craft and what
Yeah.
have you. And he was talking a few weeks ago, and he said, "Now these are trained people here. This is not just and he didn't mean it the way it sounded, but this is not. I'm going to be nicer, your average citizen." And that's what we need. More average people talking about this, and not just these people specializing
Yeah.
or being in the military. We need both. And right now the narrative is, I mean, even the nomenclature is changing, to bodies to biologics and UAPs, and the military is wonderful for these acronyms. And so I want to see how far that goes, because that could wind up being troubling down the line. That will tell you what's fake news. We're the ones who know. I was listening to Chris Bledsoe, who I never really followed. I know people love his book and everything, and he's near here in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And so I was listening to one of his YouTube interviews, and he's a salt of the earth person, and a real person. And he said, you guys have all this tech, you guys have all this technology, you military intelligence. What do you want with me? And I forgot the answer he got. He was saying, you're scaring my family and what have you. And he's working with the government. He makes that very clear. But it resonated with me. For all of this, it's the government secrets, but yet pretty much just kind of John Everyman from Fayetteville, North Carolina, these beings are coming to him. And they said to him, because they come to you. And you have something that we don't know about, and we want to know what that is. So I'd like to see more everyday people in the conversation, and not have it just monopolized by our government.
You both brought up some very important points. For starters, we need to remind ourselves and anybody watching or listening that the so-called UFO phenomena, now UAP, which I can't say depersonalizes it, but it makes it into an anathema, a floaty thing rather than a real thing that you can wrap your knuckles on. But one thing I've learned over all the years I've been involved in this field is how many possibilities there are and how many intermingling things, even if we just keep it to the simple pie slice of other intelligences, be they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, any whatever theory you want to put on it, that they are here for the same reason, or that different individuals experience them very differently. For example, the work that Free does, Michael, overwhelmingly addresses the experience of people who have had positive experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, many people are traumatized by these events, and other individuals have emerged in the work to define, their experiences or help them sort them out. And for the military, as they say, for a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Since 1947, and certainly earlier, the subject of these manifestations of these different kinds of flying things have been seen through that military mindset by the military. And we are now in a particularly muscular moment in the way the military is sort of shifting and morphing. I don't see a softening of the attitude. All fear, when we take it down to the baseline, is fear of the unknown. Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to get cancer? Is my kid going to go on crack? Or, am I going to live to see my Social Security? Or did extraterrestrials create religions? If that's so, then everything I thought I knew was wrong, and I'm not in a place I really feel comfortable. So that group of non-humans that is abducting people, or representative of hard metal machines from parts unknown, coming and going with impunity for reasons unto themselves. We have to factor all those things in as people kind of come at us. The subject becomes more to the fore. I'll only end this tirade by reminding everyone of the tale of the blind man and the elephant, and each blind man has a part of the elephant holding onto a leg, an ear, a tusk, the tail, patting the hide, the trunk, and each one of them is describing to the other one what an elephant is, feels like and looks like, or feels like, and the other ones know that that individual is wrong because their experience of the elephant is, anyway. That wasn't even a question. I just rattled on a while.
Very eloquent, though. I was following.
We were mesmerized, man.
If you're going to rattle on, we're better than with friends. But it's it's the riddle wrapped in an enigma inside the onion.
Yeah.
And
no doubt. I mean, let me ask you this: what if UFOs are not hard metal machines?
Well, some are not.
I mean, what if they're creatures? What if they're
a theory that's been out there for decades?
I mean, John Keel talked about the living lights, and the only reason I'm mentioning that tonight, the other day I got an unbelievable UFO sighting. I'm going to say UFO, or actually USO. A couple was on a cruise ship, and they saw what looked like. And they're in the middle of the Bahamas. Nothing's around. Middle of the Bahamas. These things are dancing around, and they looked like, as she described it, they look like cartoon splats. You know what they look like? Those splats when you see on cartoons, they're like splat, just like these shapes. But they were all dancing with one another. But they were also chirping, like tweeting, and they were about 300 feet above the water.
That's new to me. Wow.
So this is weird because this is a weird sound that these things are obviously making, which says to me, well, maybe these are creatures somehow. Well, with that, they go in. They of course didn't have the cell phone. They go in to get the cell phone. She grabs him and says, "Look," and grabs him and brings him back and says that here. And I know these people. I know these people personally. That I could vouch for their integrity. They said that an orange ball of light came out of the water underneath the ship and went after these things that were dancing around and took off. So, of course, we all see the orange orbs all the time, in a lot of videos and things like that. I myself had the same kind of sighting where these things just appeared out of nowhere and then just disappeared. They were definitely not drones. So it makes me think, could some of these things be living creatures? Why there's no sound? There's no, or it's, you remember that movie Nope that was just out recently? Did you see that?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah. So the UFO in that was not a UFO. It wasn't a machine. It was an actual living creature. Yeah. So it makes you wonder.
There's a book by an author named Fletcher, last name Constable, Fletcher James Constable, something James Constable, and it talks about these beings in the sky. Again, if it is one thing, it doesn't negate it being the other thing.
Right.
That, part of what I think has been mass cultural confusion on and off, that are they good, are they bad? I remember being asked that at a conference a few years ago and answering, too much laughter, are you talking about the good ones or the bad ones? I think we're dealing with a myriad of intelligences that may be as wide as the human spectrum.
Exactly.
Peter, I think Kenneth Arnold, in fact, thought that the 9 UFOs he saw were alive.
Did he? I'll have to double check.
Yeah. Fall back on that, because those are the ones that get way back there on us. But I remember him. I can't remember the exact quote word for word, but he said these things looked alive.
Well, one of the things about, like the Tic Tacs, for example, that there's a piece of footage that George Adamski's protege shot like in the early 50s. And he has, many of us take him less than seriously, early contactee and a very well-known one. But I take this piece of footage seriously, and it's a thing in a field. It's moving around like a dragonfly, like a hummingbird. And that ability that some of this technology or these organisms have is something that has been observed repeatedly.
Yeah.
And of course, if it was a conventional machine with, as we would think of, a pilot, their head would be ripped off on some of these maneuvers.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no doubt. I mean, you're seeing a lot of I'm glad that they're talking about the USOs, because we're seeing a lot more of those, because I always thought that they were coming from the water anyway. With the frequency of all the sightings, they're coming from the ocean or somewhere close, maybe the ocean or the moon, somewhere close.
I'm not sure if coming from, who knows where they originate, but I have no doubts that there are, I remember how corny this sounded 40 years ago, secret underwater bases, secret underground bases. That was where you identified yourself as a complete lunatic in this work. And you might as well just, wear a giant flying saucer pin in your...
Now they're talking about it now, right now.
Not only that, Debbie Ziegelmeyer has written about it quite eloquently. I know there's another book about to come out, but Richard Dolan just has the first of 3 books on underwater UFOs available. Yep. It just came out a few days ago. It's a subject we're going to be hearing a great deal more about, and one that is fascinating. I'll also add, for anybody that's interested in looking into it deeper, the first book that addressed the subject was one by the great Ivan T. Sanderson, called Invisible Residents. And your introduction to the subject, it's one of the best first pages I've ever read of any book addressing the paranormal. But we're going to be hearing more about this.
There it is.
At the same time, thinking back, for me years ago, and kind of pondering all this stuff seriously, more or less by myself, originally without an internet or colleagues or magazines or whatever, the idea that if you can create a machine that goes through space at least, as fast as I can imagine and faster, and it gets to our atmosphere and our planet, how much extra is it going to cost to make it waterproof, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's just, and that's what's so fascinating about the technology. And I think, it's very hard for even our best minds to really wrap their minds around, these civilizations are, you're talking about 60th century technology, and we're trying to figure it out here in the 21st century. And even though a lot of it we already have, and I'm sure it's secret, but still, again, Ishad Hayam Ashad made a really interesting statement. Well, in a lot of ways, when he came out and said that there is a galactic federation, that the United States and other nations are in contact, and he had talked about that, we talk about governments and not wanting disclosure, but he intimated that there were star people that did not want disclosure. And he said that one of the reasons, and humans, we think about, and I think it's valid, we're warlike, we're just not the most evolved, at least collectively speaking, it seems. But he said that some of the extraterrestrial races didn't want disclosure because we didn't yet know what space was. And until we figured that out, some of these beings were not anxious for us to have this disclosure. I thought that was fascinating. Well, just the mere fact that obviously he said that this has been a secret for 70 plus years, but that means that there are people at the table talking about us. Now, we don't know who's representing us, but we're being talked about. But there's an old saying that if you're not at the table, you're usually on the menu. And so, and I don't mean that in some, some Twilight Zone, to serve, man. I'm not talking about that. But what I am talking about is that, I mean, this man, and he has no reason to lie, and no one has shut him up. No one has silenced him. No one has said, and so it's just fascinating. He talked about bases on Mars and the moon. Okay, and so this is real.
Yeah.
And so there's so much more to really what the story is, and so much more that we just don't realize, but we do realize that there's more to it.
Well, I think sometimes
spoon fed,
the great ufologist Stanton T. Friedman, one
Yes.
of his postulates, going back certainly some decades, was that for the major world governments, the most important thing for them in their nuts and bolts worlds is the technology. And
Yes.
it seems, by some thinking, that we have successfully back engineered, so to say, aspects of this technology.
Yeah.
Have we cracked it completely? Are we creating some of these things that mimic the behavior of these original craft from parts unknown, or is it proving elusive to get beyond a certain point? Or if we have done it, are we now hiding that technology or minimizing it to the greatest degree? Because if it gets out that we have now mastered this motive force, it's the old argument going back to the 40s of the stock market could crash, the petrochemical industry could go into a dive, people would go into hysterics, religious people would, all of the panic mode, which I don't, may affect certain parts of the population, but certainly not others. Again, we know, well, I take that back. We all know of people in the work who will tell you exactly what planet and how long these beings have been coming here and what they have for breakfast and what their whole thing is about. And they say they know it. I know how little I know and can prove empirically, but I certainly know we're not alone, and that they may come from a whole number of locations. My interest has remained focused on those that take people and bring them back, at least to the greatest degree that we know of. And that's where my interest continues to be, to a great degree. But it's all seems to be connected. And again, I'm holding on to my part of the elephant.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, you worked with, Bud Hopkins, one of the greatest, individuals in this industry, that was working with abductees and people that have had, profound experiences. So we don't, and Michael too. I mean, all of us have had these profound experiences, and so I never take that lightly. I always say that, look, the government doesn't want to acknowledge what it can't control. So there is a real piece right there. Yes. And again, I really think that a lot of this, they don't know what these, some of it they do know, but I think there's a lot of it they have no idea. But look at this, Peter. You talked about mass chaos and stuff like this, but we went through COVID. That was insane. I mean, it was just horrific what we went through. But I think human beings have this, like, by nature, I think have this, I don't know, like you want to say a governor or something, in, that we adapt to a situation, and if there was disclosure and saying, hey, they've been here, they come from here. I don't know. I think, you're going to get some people that are going to probably, be very panicked about it. But then you're going to get a dynamic of people that are open to it and like, wow, this is a new era. This is like a new enlightenment. Does that make sense? I mean, I think it's something along those lines, but what do I know? I mean, it's just like when it happens, how are we going to act? What are we going to do?
Well, one thing that's been gratifying to see over the years, and there was a time I used to think, is there going to be like a next generation of geeks that are willing to be outsiders on this and continue, pick up where somebody else left off? And now, of course, it's all transcended. And doing this work after the show, both you guys should go to the KUNX website and just take a look at all the different shows and think that each one of these hosts has a backstory that brought them to the point in their lives that they thought, I need to be out there helping others to understand what I'm beginning to put together, and maybe in the process help myself understand it as well. It's really a very healthy trend to see more people in that area of communication. And point I make and remake, I don't know to what degree it will matter in the long run, but UFOs and their implications for humanity is a subject that people of very different political beliefs can come together on and absolutely support each other's opinions on. And that's really important. We need all the subjects we can get that have the potential of bringing people together. And this one, allegorically and actually.
I mean, I interviewed Michael, and, all of us have had these profound experiences. And Michael, when you told me about that woman that you went to go see in New York, and you opened the door and you could see your breath in that. Yeah. I mean, that's like, you can't fake that. You can't write this stuff. That same similar stuff has happened on a lot of these investigations. So Peter, you asked earlier, like, what was like a story or something like that we,
I asked specifically that I'd like us each during this show to tell at least one story of something that we either personally observed or happened to us that we will not forget and that we're still not sure of how to sort out.
Who wants
and
to
if you have one of those?
Oh, well, I'll go because I mean, I have several, but one that I'll never forget really. And it was something that really profoundly, it happened. Everybody's heard me talk about the Beast of Bray Road. I'm not going to talk about that because this is something different. This was way before I was always into the paranormal, but it was way before I started my show, anything like that. I was on a gig, and I was going to a gig, and this was November of 1997. And I'm in my car going to the gig. It's night. It's dark, because it gets dark early. It was a little rainy out, a little cold. And I'm driving down this dark road, nobody around. It's just a dark road. I'm late for the gig. I'm driving. And I'm like 55, whatever. I'm going fast. And all of a sudden, a deer runs out in front of me. Bam! And I hit it. And I felt terrible. And so this deer and I are sliding. I slammed the brakes on. We're sliding 60 feet until I stop the car. I get out of the car and I see this poor deer there, and I felt terrible. And I'm like looking down at this thing, and all of a sudden, now I have to preface this by saying I'm also a piano player, as you know. Yeah. I hear a woman's voice in the woods behind me say, "How's your hands?" In the dark of night, I hear this voice. I turn around. This woman in white comes out, all white robes, comes out onto the road, comes in front of my car. And it looks like, when someone's standing in front of the car lights, you could see like their silhouette. It kind of looks blurry. You really can't see them that well because of the backlight. And that's how I saw her. And what freaked me out, though, was she went down and picked this 200-pound deer, took it by the ear, and dragged it off the road like it was nothing, like it was light as a feather. And she said, "You better get in your car and get out of here." And I got in my car, went to the gig, told the guys what happened. They were freaked out. I went back the next day thinking maybe there was a house there. Maybe there was somebody in the woods that spooked the deer out. There was no houses. It was all woods. And this happened in Bucks County. And that's something I'll never forget. And it was something that I never put these two things together, but my father had the same experience in the mid 70s of this lady in white. So this is something that's now, over the years, I've looked at her as my guardian angel. You know, there was nothing scary about it. She didn't say anything weird or anything. It was just like, it just was, and it happened. That was the whole thing. So it's something that I'll never forget. It's something that is part of my being that's always there. And it's an angel. I think it's an angel. I think that's something that has followed me, and I'm okay with it. If there's an attachment, I'm okay with that. But yeah, incredible.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Wow.
That's intense.
Michael,
that's intense.
Does a story come to mind for you?
Yeah. One does, and maybe we'll do another one later.
Yeah.
But they're kind of connected. You know, I do my UFO thing in the Bible and ancient text, and I've always, wondered why. Nowhere in the Bible does it say these beings had wings. I figured that our ancestors drew wings on them to let us know they could fly. But this happened when I was living in New York, and then I'll tie it into something very quickly. It's about angels or messengers. One day I was walking very, very early. I think I was going to a movie shoot. And I was down around 23rd and Broadway, and the set was further down. And it was really early in the morning, and I see this homeless guy sitting on the curb. And, I see him, and I'm walking, but my mind is focused on something else. And I must have been frowning, because when I walked closer to him, he said, "Hey, man, why the frown?" And he said, "It's a beautiful day, right?" And so I looked at him and I thought to myself, yeah, man, this guy's homeless and he's getting it. And so I thanked him. I gave him a few dollars, and I took about 5 steps, and I turned around, and that guy was not there. And there was hardly anyone. There's no way he could have moved. No way. And there was no one else really on the street that early in the morning, maybe about 6:30, 7 o'clock. So then a couple weeks later, I'm at the library on 42nd and 5th. I'm sorry, 38th and 5th. I'm walking uptown. It's crowded, but there's a homeless guy sitting on the sitting on the curb. And he says, "How you doing?" And I said, "Well, how are you?" I said, "You doing okay? I mean, you're out here." He said, "Oh, man, I'm always out here." Chat, chat, chat. So I gave him some change. And he said, you make sure you have a good day, sir." And I took about 6 or 7 steps, and I turned around, and there was nobody there.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So
this was on a street?
This was in the middle of the day at 38th and 5th Avenue.
Was it particularly busy foot traffic?
Yes. And I took 7 steps, no more than that. And I turned around, and this guy was gone. Okay. Wow. Lastly, my dad died eventually of pancreatic cancer. And so, but they gave him 3 months. He took 8 years. But I remember I said, "Well, Dad, how did you know you had it?" And he said, "I was sitting outside with some friends on a porch, and a homeless guy came up, and we gave him some money. And the homeless man looked at me, and he said," I'm not going to swear, but he said, "You don't look too good. You really look like crap." And he said, "Look at your eyes, man. Look at your eyes." And he walked away. And my dad took it seriously, and he went to his doctor, and he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Now, what is all of this? In the book of Hebrews, chapter 13, verse 2, it says to always be kind to strangers, because you may be entertaining angels unawares. And so now this is the book of Hebrews, so we're talking several thousand years ago, but we're also talking about some of these beings, because angel only tells you what they do. It doesn't tell you where they're from. It doesn't tell you what they look like. It just tells you they're on assignment. They are envoys, diplomats, call it what you will. But they look, or they could make themselves look enough like human beings. that you don't even know.
Hmm.
So anyway, that's my story.
Love
I
that.
don't think this story involves angels. It's about half a dozen years ago, and I had just given a talk at a really nice library outside of Philadelphia. My friend Jennifer Stein's longtime mainline MUFON group has monthly meetings and always brings in speakers, and I had a veteran of that wonderful program. And part of what I always enjoyed, Jennifer now lives in Arizona, but when she lived in Philadelphia, was after the talk, anybody that wanted to could join the speaker and whomever for dinner. It was always a big Greek diner, a couple minutes away, 24 hours a day. And aside from my honorarium, I got to order whatever I wanted for dinner. And, I was looking forward to it. Stayed a few minutes longer than I normally would. A couple of people wanted to ask questions, and I walked in, and they had commandeered one really long table. I'm sure there were more than 20 people at it, with one whole wall, people's backs to it. And I knew a number of the people, but there was only one open seat, and it was at the far left, directly opposite what I'll euphemistically call an older man, and who I didn't know. And frankly, my judgmentalness cracked right in. It's like, this looks like it's going to be kind of a boring dinner companion. My real friends were at the far end, waved to me and got back to their talking. And I didn't have anybody really on either side. Anyway, he just kind of introduced himself, not by name, but just, I enjoyed your talk. I thought maybe he's in his late 70s, probably worked an outdoor job, skin ruddy. In a different time, I would have said his wardrobe came from Sears Roebuck. It was all very utilitarian clothing, nothing new. And he just started to talk, and I'm a polite listener and completely trapped in I'm a legend in my own mind kind of night, and I should be, sitting at the other end of the table with people saying witty things about my talk. But the better part of me started to take over, and I listened. And he said, I was a police officer my whole life in Philadelphia, never anything more than a beat cop in working class neighborhoods. I retired after 30 odd years, and started to talk about early on in his career that he had been called because a man was leaning out of an apartment window, waving a shotgun and screaming bloody murder. And he was fairly new patrolman and had to go up the stairs, knowing that this man was angry and had a weapon. And near the landing, the man appeared and started yelling at him, waving the weapon. And he took a service revolver and he shot him in the arm. And he told me how bad he felt about shooting this guy, especially after learning the wrongs that his woman had just done him and left him without anything and cleaned out his bank account, and that he lost part of his arm as a result of the injury. And I'm thinking, where are we going here? And this is a hard life, and God wants somebody to talk to and think out. Then he started to talk about another thing that happened to him on the beat some years later. And at a certain point, I realized I needed to be listening. And he said he got a call that, I think this was in the old box days where you check in at the, and learned that there was a fire in the neighborhood, made his way there as quick as possible. And it was a house on fire, a two-story house, and people outside screaming, and obviously the woman of the house screaming that her two children were inside. And he just went into this house, and it was a roaring inferno. and made his way to the back. And it's a boy and a girl, 3 and 6 or 7, and carried her out first, handed her off. He's already getting singed, goes back in, gets the boy, takes him out. And my response was kind of that automatic, gosh, that was so brave of you. And he said, that's not what I wanted to tell you. He said, I handed him off to the ambulance people. The girl died on the way to the hospital. And the boy died not long after. I remember he had blue pajamas on with maroon piping. And, you do your best, and time passes. He says it's now 6 or 7 years later. He's still working a beat. He's in that part of Philadelphia. It's lunchtime. He goes into a luncheonette he goes into sometimes and sits at a table by himself and orders what he's going to have for lunch and looks around. And he sees some tables away. There's a family, mom and dad and 2 young kids. And there's a little boy sitting at the table, turns around, 6 or 7. And he said it was him. It was him. I remember his face. And I then realized that the kid is wearing a blue T-shirt with maroon piping on it. And I knew I just had to get out of there. But the kid's paying attention to me now and says something to the parents. The parents say something to him. And as I get up to leave, I'm not staying for lunch. I leave my money and I go to walk out, and he's walking faster. And he walks right to that point where he confronts me. And I look, and there's his parents smiling and nodding like, oh, nice police officer and little boy. And he looks down at him, and he says, the boy looked up at me and said, quote unquote, you recognized me, didn't you?
Wow.
I don't even remember what happened next in the conversation. I think we just sat there quietly for a time.
Wow.
I never asked him his name. I called Jennifer a day or 2 later. I just couldn't get it out of my mind, and asked her if she had any idea who he was, or a regular, and vaguely remembered him, but not somebody who attended. Anyway,
wow.
As he was speaking at a certain point, that feeling of you go into a hyper state of trying to assess somebody's character. Are they having me on? Are they yanking my chain? Is this person, what would be their motive? To fool somebody who's famous to a tiny percentage of people. And I got that he was sharing with me something that he wanted to get off his chest, that he had a sense he could talk to me about. And I realized I, forever after, thought how that I would have never had that experience had another seat been open at the table.
Yeah.
That's intense.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautifully told. It reminded me of a couple. It reminded me, I used to go to Marianne Williamson's lectures on A Course in Miracles many years ago. And this was before she was Marianne on Oprah and all that. But, and she would fly back and forth from LA to New York. And she would go to the Universalist church up on 77 in Central Park, West Peter. I know you know where it is. And she talked about that. And I love the way you told the story in your self-deprecating way. And I can relate. Man, I'm this is my night. I'm supposed to be down there. I remember because when I went to a MUFON thing in Arizona, they do that. You get your stipend, but they take you to dinner. And it's usually a lot of people. And so I was resonating with you. But I remember Marianne talking about, she said, sometimes the ego, we want to be in the moment, but sometimes it's hard for us. And she talked about being in a grocery store, and she's looking at her watch, and she's supposed to be somewhere, and she's looking again. And she said she would catch herself. She said, this is the perfect place for me to be at this time. I'm supposed to be talking to this person now, not thinking about, I got to be there. And the way you just kind of talks yourself into be
Well,
here now.
and
I
being here
love
now,
that.
believe it or not, we have just blown through our first hour. Peter Robin, Eric
My God.
Mintel, Michael Carter.
Oh,
Meanwhile, here on Earth, back in 5.
Tickets are now on sale for Rebels of Disclosure 2025, May 12th through the 15th in Grafton, Illinois at the beautiful Pierre Marquette Lodge and Conference Center. This will be a 4-day event with 12 speakers covering topics such as ET contact, experiencer testimonies, lost history, secret space programs, time travel, Illuminati, parallel realities, and so much more. Visit journeytotruth.online for more details.
The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to Research a Haunted House can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unxmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unxmedia.com or amazon.com.
And Peter Robbins back. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth. My guests tonight, Eric Mintel and Michael Carter. Gentlemen, welcome back. And I thought, let's start out the hour, Eric, with you letting folks know about an event that is coming up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania in less than 2 weeks. And before I even let you say a word about it, let me just say I have helped to organize a number of conferences over the years. It can be very gratifying work and incredibly thankless work, where you've taken on a bigger piece than you ever imagined that you would. And last year, you decided to organize a paranormal conference, and it went well enough that you are doing it again. Tell us about it and how people can join us.
Thank you again, and thanks for having me on tonight. And I'll tell you, this is definitely a labor of love, and because it's been very, very satisfying. Um, I'm working with Bucks County Community College. Couldn't have a better partner in this. Really top notch. And Peter, you're going to be there, so you're going to have a good time. And Michael, I promise you next year, I'm saying it right here, you're coming next year. You're going to be there. Being our second year, like you just mentioned. So March 8th, it's going to be the Bucks County Paranormal Convention, which we're calling Bucks County Paracon. And it's from 12 to 7 at Bucks County Community College in Newtown, Pennsylvania. We've got incredible speakers. We've got incredible food vendors. We've got food trucks. And I always like to say, and we got free parking. So that's always a plus. But last year was unbelievable. I thought maybe, it was our first year. I didn't know what to expect. I thought maybe we'd have a couple of hundred people there. We had over 1,000 people there. It was amazing. And I only found out about that just about a month and a half ago of the numbers for last year. So this was phenomenal, man. So we're going to do it again this year. And we've got you speaking. We've got Tom Carey. We've got Charles Halt, which I know you guys are familiar with. We've got Bill Burns is making a special appearance. We've got Stan Gordon, myself, and Dominic are going to do about 20 minutes of a talk. And Jim Krug talking about aliens on the moon and all these, but lots of different talks about many, many different subjects. Tom Carey is going to be there talking about Roswell deathbed confessions. It's going to be unbelievable. So we're going to have a really good time. And being this is an event, I like to treat this like it's a party. Last year, I didn't know what to expect. We had people came dressed as aliens. They came dressed as Men in Black. They were they came as Bigfoot. It turned into this big Comic-Con, but it was incredible. They were very, very happy, and everybody left smiling. And that's what I try to create, is a real positive environment where people could talk about their experiences. There's no ridicule, and it's a great hub for all of this. So this is something that we're going to continue for hopefully many years to come.
It seems like it's already evolved into a UFO festival conference, which we have more and more of them around the country. And the thing that I like about the ones that I've attended is, while you have a really serious event with credible, respected speakers, often authors or well-known researchers, you also have stuff that's a lot of fun. And let's face it, the UFO alien subjects have entrenched themselves so deeply into the world of popular culture and advertising. And, well, it's part of the fabric of life, really.
Right.
And however people want to do it, as long as it's not mean-spirited or mocking.
Right.
For me.
And that's the whole thing. And this is why, my team in our show is all about truth-based investigating. We're not using any of the spirit boxes and things like that. It's all truth. But we're covering it all: ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, Dogman, the drone situation that's been going on, which is crazy. So, and the USOs. So there's going to be a lot of different topics there. All of our authors that were there last year sold out of all their books. All of our vendors sold out of everything last year. So it was a great, great environment, and we're going to repeat it again this year. So people could get tickets right there, or they can go to my website at ericmintellinvestigates.org, and there's a ticket link that goes right to the college, or they could go on bucks.edu, bucks.edu, and look for the events and go right to the ticket link right there. But it's going to be a great event. So it's like I said, it's a labor of love. It's a lot of work, but I have a good partner, Pete Chevereau at the college. He's great. He takes care of all the technical stuff. I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. And I just have to worry about, getting the good speakers. And we've also got, I just forgot to mention, Dave Schrader from the Holzer Files is going to be there. And I'm the guy. I'll be designated to pick him up from the airport and all that kind of stuff. But that's okay. Last year we had Nick Pope, which I know you know, Michael, and you know you guys have everybody. And what a gracious guy! I mean, he was a joy to work with, and it was great that I went right through just Nick. I didn't have to go through anyone else. I just went through Nick. He was in New York at the time and could do it, and it was incredible. So we've got this event, and I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. But I can't believe it's going to be almost 2 weeks, almost less than 2 weeks away, or 2.5 weeks. But yeah, so it's exciting. It's going to be a really good time.
I think it's less than 2 weeks.
It is less than 2 weeks. I just realized that. And being a jazz musician too, like what we're doing right here tonight, we're improvisers. We're just improvisers, and this is why I love talking with you guys, because we could just riff off any subject. And
I've got one to jump into. And it's something that we all come down to if you are a serious student of the subject, which is ancient visitations and the taboo around it to some degree for some people, because whatever your holy book is, for some people, they're fairly inflexible about interpretations. And I wanted to know, Michael, I'm not sure if I asked you when I guess where you're dealing with the subject of extraterrestriality in particular here, with people of faith, some of whom probably feel to some degree challenged by this possible blasphemy or point that they really don't want to contemplate. Can you give us an idea of the range of reactions as somebody who is an ordained minister that you have had from people who have read your book that either really thank you for it because it answered some possible questions, or were outraged, quite simply, that you would entertain such a terrible idea?
Yeah. Well, they run the gamut. Most of the times, the people are grateful because they say, I've had these experiences, some of high strangeness, like Eric talked about, and you and myself, and they didn't have anybody to talk to it about. So, and some people will say, I've been, holding this in for 60 years, 70 years. And I just have no one to talk to. Some people wonder if they can still keep their faith tradition and still believe in a populated universe. And I say, yeah, of course you can. Pick up a Bible. That's what they were trying to do. And I did have one woman who tried to get me fired. And I don't even know if this woman was really a person of faith. In the UU world, we have, when I go to church on Sunday, there are atheists there, there are Buddhists, there are people who don't know, don't care. It's always a challenge, but I love that. And she saw an Ancient Alien episode, and she said, I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was flipping channels, and I saw my minister talking about little green men.
Uh-oh.
And she tried to get me fired. She came to the board of the church, and she said, I'm embarrassed by this. I don't like that. And she was someone who really was a big donor as well. And so fortunately for me, my board said, look, he's not preaching this from the pulpit. He may be right, but we don't think this is egregious enough for you to come here and ask us to terminate him. But guys, this is what I'm hoping will happen down the line, because we are talking about the tech and we are talking about national security issues. But eventually, we're going to have to talk about religion. And even with these hearings, you have not heard a peep out of any religious organization. Now, of course, the Vatican has always been the headlight on this in the sense of they, yes, secrets and that kind of thing. But, in
In
2009,
more recent years, they've been much more open
they've been
about it.
much more open about it. But that's where I'm hoping we're going to have to go there anyway.
Yeah.
But it runs the gamut. But fortunately for me, people have come forward and said, because there are a lot of ministers and academics who know that what I'm saying and other folks are saying, they know it's true. But they cannot lose their tenure. They cannot throw their careers away. They've got a family, but they know, especially if they've taken some of the, if you're an academic and you've been in seminary and you know some of the Hebrew or you know some of the Aramaic, it's written right there, but they can't come out and say. And I say that so people don't think it's always some grand conspiracy. It's just basic, hey man, I don't want to lose this job. Because I'm in this denomination, which is fairly progressive, even if they don't believe me, I don't have a bishop or pope or diocese to say, hey, you got to dial that back.
Also,
So I'm fortunate.
when push comes to shove, you can say, with respect, have you read any of my books? I would say if you do, you'll see a very well researched, very well reasoned line of thinking that it's not a cartoon. It's not as simple as dismissing you because how dare you associate yourself with a subject that we all know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yes. But yeah. And when you listen to like Tim Burchett from the great state of
Right.
Tennessee,
Yeah.
and he comes out and he says that the Bible is a book of UFOs. And if he's saying that, he's been given permission to say that. But he also goes about saying that there are people in high levels of government who say this is demonic
Yeah.
and this is not going to be talked about.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you have people in positions of power who are saying that this is demonic, we need to shut it down, or we need to confront it militarily.
Exactly.
And so that's where it gets a little hairy.
That concerns me as well. I thought we would spend a few minutes based on the fact that we're all backgrounded as different kinds of artists. Michael, you have your years of acting experience. For myself, it's in the visual arts. And Eric, of course, you are a pianist and a musician and composer. And it's been, I guess, since Eric von Daniken set the whole ancient astronaut gestalt into play back in the 1960s with his first book.
Yes.
That the images that are presented to us from ancient cultures, for some people, function as proof. For others, they're ludicrous, and everything in between. I know that, this is a terribly romantic subject on a certain level. And imagine having what we'll call a UFO experience or UFO sighting, not in the age of flight, the last 120 odd years or so, generally speaking, but 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. Also, if you were an artist attempting, or anybody attempting to scratch an image into something of what you had seen, you had a special responsibility in a way. Sometimes, especially back in the day, used to think how different it was to be a painter before the 1830s, when daguerreotypes and other types of early photography were pioneered. It had to be some kind of crisis on a certain level for people whose whole life and tradition, unbroken, going back to the mists of time, had been to set down images. Now there's a machine that can do it. And so a certain weight, whether or not you were an indigenous person or, a scholar in the Renaissance. And I just want to look at a few images here with you guys. This is one, it's Aboriginal. And in, ancient astronaut culture, so to say, it's been put forward as, two guys in protective suits with helmets and, lines coming off of maybe radiating energy or something. I look at it and I think, sadly, often it's the simplest, most boring explanation. Maybe this was some kind of ceremonial thing where you took, a branch with some limber to it, and there were other sticks in it. Is that more likely than visiting spacemen? For me, yes, it's a lot more boring and unsexy. But then, once again, big eyes and no halos or anti-halos. It's hardly definitive. And as one wonderful thing, though, I think we can all agree on is there is so much imagery that is so related to other imagery from varying points in the world that one senses that things were connected up at some point, or that a universal consciousness sort of went out. Where things really changed for me is in medieval times, when there was almost so few people were literate, the record keeping was done by monks. And the records of monasteries and what we call the Dark Ages, this fresco here from a monastery in what would have been Yugoslavia in the mid 1300s, a traditional crucifixion. But on the far left top, and under the meanwhile here on Earth, on the far right top, we have two definitive images that are really intriguing. I'm thinking if I'm hanging out in the 14th century and I've got a great imagination, and maybe this is a depiction of an angel in an angel ship, are they going to let me paint this on the wall and be part of something that's going to be here forever? Unless we all agree, this was amazing. We saw these things going through the sky, and you know what? Some people call it blasphemy. We are adding these things to our depiction of the crucifixion. This is, the way we're going to handle it. And if the head monk has for me, this is compelling. Any gut feelings or thoughts here from either of you on that line of thinking?
Oh, I think all of there's always a bit of truth to the folklore, right? They saw something, so they needed to depict it the best way they knew how at the time. Yeah. I mean, look at the picture of the Madonna and Child, and there's a scene of a guy looking at a UFO behind her.
That's correct, and we're about to get to that one.
I mean, that right there is like, what is going on there?
And I look at this one as a painter, and I think to myself, with a painter's experience and a good imagination, I'm out there and, I'm working on a commission for the church, because that's who you painted for back at the time, or extremely wealthy individuals doing a portrait sometimes. But I saw this thing in the sky, and I saw it with my dog. I was out walking with my dog, and damn it, I'm painting it into this. And I'm I'm committed. This was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. And it wasn't a saint. It wasn't something that was, looking like anything godly. It was this thing, and damn it, I'm going to paint it. For me, that's also amazingly compelling evidence that human factor there, and that thing that's in the sky there. This is one that I don't have the provenance on, but it's also thought-provoking.
The one that he's looking at with the dog, it kind of reminds me of Close Encounters, with the ship with all those, the spires coming off the ship.
Yeah. Or again, it could have been glowing so brightly,
right,
that or radiating some kind of energetic reality. But in any case, when we really come down to the image itself, it does look like a disc shape, with a convex bottom, and either, like you say, it almost looks like zillions of antenna coming off of it, or allegorically. But he's committed himself to painting a very particular image, and we know that this is a painter, capable of working at the highest levels of production, to put it mildly.
Michael, could that have any kind of like religious significance to it? Could that be some kind of like the Holy Spirit, maybe?
I would say yes. I mean, it's photos like that, or paintings like that, that lend more credence to that our ancestors knew that we lived in with paleo contact in a populated universe, and I try to look at this and see what that does for us today, because when I read the Bible, when I look at the Mesopotamian texts that predate, and even when you listen to native Aboriginal stories, it's always beings have come down, helped us jumpstart civilization, and upgraded us. And so I was just reading Josephus the other day, because in the War of the Jews in chapter 6, he talks about flying shields in the sky over the Battle of Jerusalem. I mean, so I don't know how many ways we can be told that if you can't get it, then you're not going to get it at all. We're being told that we're not alone. Probably our religions were started from these beings, intentionally or not. One could argue, but that you could argue both sides. And so, because of their technology, they looked enough like us that in some stories you can't tell that they're not human, but they're different enough from us that when they started mating with us, as Genesis tells us, we have a hybrid race. So this hybrid thing didn't just start now; it's been going on since the Book of Enoch, and so I think at this point there's no doubt. I also feel that that's one of the reasons why, at least for right now, the powers that be don't want to touch this stuff, because basically what we're being told, whether you're reading the Mahabharata, whether you're reading the Old or New Testaments, whether you're reading the Babylonian, the Epic of Gilgamesh, what we're being told is that we were invaded. Now, that's not a pretty word. You can say there was an intervention, but we were invaded. This planet was invaded, and these books are telling us what it was like to share the planet with these beings, who some were called Anunnaki, some were called the Elohim, the Nephilim. And so that's big stuff to lay on someone in 2025. But somehow we've got to be able, because that's, when the Vedas talk about these flying cities and the Vimanas, we were invaded. People came from elsewhere and colonized our planet. Yeah. And they may come back. Some of them are already here. And so that's a big story. I argue that we already are in disclosure. But for for your president of the United States or any country to come out and say what I just said, I don't know how delicately you could put that. So I can understand how it's being spoon-fed. But again, I would argue, but we don't have, that's not what the show's about tonight, that we're being told that we're not alone. Unequivocally.
I would agree. I would agree to that.
But no president is going to come out and commit political suicide and come out on the White House lawn and say, guess what, folks? Not only have we been invaded, but we've signed treaties. Yes, unconstitutional, but, give us a break. That's suicide. That is suicide. Political suicide. But and there are treaties probably that it's a whole big mess. And so give us little by little. I want more, but give it little by little. But that's what we're talking about. We're talking about admitting that we were invaded. And our ancestors wrote these stories to tell us what that was like.
Yeah, you've laid it out in a way that makes a lot of sense. And this human resistance to admitting, not that you were wrong, but that you misinterpreted or you acted out of fear, and as a result, you became a habitual liar. It always occurred to me, at least as it came up in the work, that whether or not, whatever your party politics are, no president, I think, is in a hurry to be the disclosure president, at least up until this point. There are too many unpredictables. And one of them, well, it's not unpredictable, but when you get to be president, you join a very exclusive club. And it matters less whether you're Republican, Democrat, or whatever, than you are now a president or a past president. And whether you're alive or, your relatives are very proud of the fact that they're related to you. Every president, since and including Harry Truman, has been an unindicted co-conspirator in the biggest cover-up in history.
Yes.
They're touchy about information that overt getting out. And like you say, that idea of we have been invaded and we've never been able to find a way to fight the invader off. Once again, the preoccupation of the military mind to addressing the machine-like UFOs, because we've got new hardware we want to try out, and at the same time, we're the military. This is what we do. If there were an equivalent entity that, say, governed the whole kind of alien persona, better defined in free organizations records than in Pentagon kind of confrontations, we might be evolving in a different way. But I think fear continues to dominate over love when we explore this subject. Again, it is the ultimate fear of the unknown, and all fear is fear of the unknown.
I like what Michael said, though. Just to come out and say it. They're not going to do that. But I think we are in that dynamic now that we're having that disclosure, and
disclosure is a process, and it is definitely happening more every day.
Oh yeah.
Some people visualize it as every world leader getting on television at the same moment and telling their people.
And when did we ever see that? We never saw that. Just this is something brand new. I mean, this is an enlightenment, I think, on that half of the community. Because look, I don't care. You've got people that will not believe it in one way, shape, or another. They're just going to not believe it. There's nothing you can do to change their mind. It'll be in front of them. They still won't believe it. I choose to surround myself with forward-thinking people, because look, it's not like, well, this is the way it's done around here. You've got to have an open mind. You have to have an open mind with all of this stuff. And yeah, sure, there's people that are going to be scared from it for sure. But we've gone through a lot. Human beings have gone through a lot. And this is just another level of, say, the school ground that we're on. We're still in school. We're still learning. This is nothing new.
Yeah.
We're still constantly learning. And I think, you guys have shown that. I mean, I know that both of you guys I respect so highly, because just being around you and talking about this stuff, I personally opened my mind to all kinds of different, other ideas to this, and I'm glad that people are listening.
The other thing about this too, guys, is, and I want to be careful how I phrase this. A lot of folks in the UFO community, and that's a nebulous term, they say, I don't want to get into politics. I don't know, no, that's politics. But let me tell you, we're talking about politics. Now, I'm not talking about whether blue state, red state. I'm not talking about that. That's another kind of politics.
Right.
But we're talking about exopolitics, because the exopolitics affects the geopolitics. Because, we're talking about disclosure. Well, disclosure. We don't want to let our enemies know just how much of this tech we have, or they don't want to let us know. But that affects the geopolitical sphere. That affects the war in Ukraine. That affects what's going on in Gaza. Because I wish I could get this book. It's right there. Oh, anyway, give me a second. Right there. I want you to see this. It's called The Secret Commonwealth of elves, fauns, and fairies. It's by a guy. He was a Episcopal or Presbyterian minister, Robert Kirk. Now, he wrote this book back in the 19th century, and or 18th century, and he started to take the stories around Scotland and the Celtic stories, because they were telling them about these beings. And he was later murdered. But to make a long story short, it's worth having. And he said he started taking it seriously, what they were saying. Now, obviously, they talked, it's religion involved, and these fairies and divas and what have you, that they're real. And some of them today, we would say, that sounds like a space story or what have you. But what you get from this book is that you cannot understand the way the world works unless you understand that there is an extraterrestrial overlay to everything that happens in our governments and on our planet. Now, Hayam Mashed alluded to that when he talked about this galactic federation, the conversations they're having about how we're progressing. This person said this. He was murdered later. It was very threatening to a lot of religious people. But basically, that we get upset because why don't our leaders want to do this? Why are they not being transparent? And he was saying back then, and what Hayam Mashed and others are saying, is that there is so there's our leaders, but then there's an extraterrestrial overlay telling them just how much. Putin said something about 2 months ago that was very intriguing. It was on a YouTube interview, and he was talking about the election, and he said, I've survived quite a few of your American presidents. Of course he has. His elections are rigged, but of course you have. But he said, let me tell you how your system works. He says your president gets elected, has all these plans, all these ideas of what he wants to do. And when he gets elected, they take him into a room. They sit him down. 2 men in dark suits and ties come in with a briefcase. They close the door behind him. They open the briefcase and they look at the president and say, this is what we're going to do. This is how it works. And so many of us believe that the president runs the country. I mean, we may say we don't believe it, but because that's why, like whoever it is, in 4 to 8 years, they're going to make our lives so much better. That's that, or not.
Yeah.
But it's not even humanly possible. But that's part of this whole shtick. No one can do that in 4, 8, 12. Maybe Roosevelt did it when he had 13 years. But my point being is just that a lot of it is you just got to go deeper. You got to go deeper. What's behind this? Because there are people telling, according to Brother Robert Kirk, and obviously Hayam Mashed, that there is an otherworldly governance that is telling our leaders this is, and you know how he said you could tell? He said, because when a lot of the policies of your government start not to have compassion, start not just to be cruel, start just to be devoid of any kind of morality, he says, then you may guess that there is a non-human element to what is going on. I found it intriguing. It's called The Secret Commonwealth by Robert Kirk.
It goes, yeah, it's great. Well, and the book Stranger at the Pentagon, right?
Yeah.
About
Reverend Strangers.
And that goes back to the treaty with Eisenhower and the aliens.
The created treaty. But there may be other. See, that's the other thing. There may be other treaties that we've signed that we can't. Once you come, and you know what and this is not new. You know what we need to do? We need to go back and look at what Tutu and Mandela and de Klerk did, because what they did was they just had this truth and reconciliation. Look, people were murdered. We did some things that, oh my God, but we can't change that now. But if you come clean right now, you don't lose your pensions, you don't lose your jobs, we're not going to get you for breaking your non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah.
Let's just come clean right now, because there's no other way you can do it, because people did lose their lives. People were killed for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or knowing too much, or talking too much. And there were treaties. There are probably treaties beyond what Eisenhower allegedly did. And you can't come clean and say that, because it's called treason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I don't know. I mean, no one's calling me, asking me, but I would take it there. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. South Africa's not a paragon of virtue, but they were getting ready to split themselves up. And that Truth and Reconciliation Committee helped propel them forward. We need that here. You come clean with us, you're going to be okay. We know you did some stuff, you probably were told, but otherwise, it may be a minute before this stuff because I'm sure there were other treaties signed. I'm sure that wasn't the only one.
Yeah. Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Tons.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. See what you've created, Peter?
I am one of those people. I have never seen what I call overwhelming evidence for this treaty. For me, it's still, as again, the late great Stanton Friedman used to say, in my gray box.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen what I would call orphan documents, things that look official, but have absolutely zero provenance. And of course, it's a serious part of the legend, the myth, the lore of 50s UFO events. But I guess, well, maybe time will tell. I'm also curious to know if either of you guys have a feeling about what I'm about to say. One of the surprises of the president's announcements of things that he was going to get done was declassify everything on the murders of John Kennedy, his brother Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King. That's a pretty big promise. And how can one know, even if you're president, that yes, everything was declassified except for the stuff that we are not declassifying? And do we think that there's a chance that even though there are thousands of pages of legitimate UFO-related, legally declassified documents out there, that we might be seeing, after this process begins, UFO documents start to come under the declassification process?
Michael, I'll take that to you.
I don't know. I mean, I'm cynical, and I also think that some of this stuff is a distraction. People going to the grocery stores, and they're not worried about who killed King at this point or Jack. They're like, man, can I afford this? There are other issues, I think, at this point, you know, that would take precedent over that kind of stuff. I think that kind of stuff is like, you know, it's a distraction, and we see what's going on now.
That's a
So
good point.
that would be last on my list.
I would guess also, you know, we see things always through our own matrix. It's probably increasingly important to individuals who remember or were touched by the events in question, rather than somebody who looks at it as, you know, past history that is to one degree or another interesting or not. Another subject I wanted to at least get into a little bit with you guys is parallels, if we can draw them, between people who exhibit noteworthy creativity in whatever area they do it, with people who have perhaps more or are open to more paranormal, non-standard UFO-related events or not. Nobody has kept records on this. There may be an equal number of accountants and people who work in fields that we don't think of as exotic or creative who have just as many. But from your experiences, what do you think about that idea?
I mean, I've interviewed witnesses who come from all walks of life. And I mean, you just said it. I interviewed an accountant who had this phenomenal UFO encounter, literally right down the street, and went to his house, and he was profound. Him and his wife both were profoundly affected by this. And you could say, yes, he is a paranormal enthusiast as well, but this, you know, what he caught on video was something I can't explain. There's people that we've interviewed that, you know, they're having a hard time coming out with what they're saying because it's affected them that much, whether it's ghosts, Bigfoot, UFOs, whatever. So I think, you know, I always say, and I don't know if you guys will agree with this, but I think in the research that we're doing, I think people are picked to experience these experiences, whether it's divine intervention, or it could be an extraterrestrial connection, or could this be something that has been in family generations?
Well, we do know that for a fact as far as UFO experiences go.
Right.
Yes.
So people, you know, that had those experiences, but people that don't know that idea, they're shocked by that. Sometimes some of the people that we've talked to, wow, I never thought about that. You know, yeah, it happened to my uncle, my grandfather, you know, so it goes back. And like Michael just said, the further back you go, the narrative's there. It's always been there.
I remember when I was working for Bud Hopkins, a fellow researcher gave him a Xerox of several pages from a diary of a grandparent of an abductee they were working with. And certainly by that point, the investigator had established beyond any reasonable doubt for any of us that this was an authentic experiencer. But this was, again, a diary from about the turn of the century, 1900 or so, in beautiful cursive writing. And the language was, you know, a little formal, more formal than we would use now, but it really was a description of being taken. And I had never read anything like it, knowing that this was a direct ancestor of the individual that the researcher was working with.
Wow.
But yeah, at first, I think when abduction research was more or less in its infancy, the logic, and understandably, was this is going to be like getting hit by lightning. If you were taken by aliens, you know, it's like winning, you know, some crazy lottery. The odds are against it. And what we then observed over the years of people putting data together was just the opposite. That if it happened to you, it has probably happened a number of times in your life from the time that you were young to whatever degree you do or don't remember it, because they certainly seem to have that ability, technologically or biologically, to create screen memories and the like. And how can one fully trust a memory that is under somebody else's control, so to say? I sometimes think, with all my experience in this work, but never having had an abduction experience, and thinking of a classic one, like, you're in your bed sleeping and there's this glow coming in from under your door, and the next thing you know, there are these beings surrounding you, and you're lifted off the bed feeling like you have no gravity at all and floated through a wall or something. That it's not that all of the cases that I've studied and the people I've interviewed and have prepared me for it. I think that would be where I would say to myself, right, I am done with this career and I am moving on to something else. That was the idea. Well, it's usually screen memories that get the credit, but for me, human physiological shock is a many wonderful, a multifaceted thing. And if I'm looking at a gray alien at the foot of my bed, knowing me, waking up in the middle of the night, I might just say, I can't be seeing what I'm seeing. Therefore, I think I'll go with one of those 4-foot white owls that was in that case, or just something else I'm going to put there right now, and I'll deal with it or not in the future. But I manufactured that fused memory myself. I didn't need them to do it for me. I think it can be either one.
I think all of us have had experiences. Michael, I know you have too, but things we can't explain, and and where does it come from? Look at Betty and Barney Hill. The first couple that came to national prominence because they had this UFO experience, and they didn't want to talk about it. They didn't talk about it for like 3 years or 2 years, and finally went to Benjamin Simon, and under hypnosis found that they had this abduction experience, and they were really brave to be able to do that. And again, I think it brought, even back then, it brought people to the forefront of having these experiences, and then being able to have a comfortable factor of doing that, of speaking about it. Our realities and probably what's here and now are probably two different things. Maybe there is like some kind of a sub reality that we're all in right now, and that there's something else behind the veil. Does that make sense? I don't know.
It's been talked about, like the Matrix. People say the Matrix is just, it's not, it's a documentary. It's about Hindu metaphysics, and it's all about Maya, what is real and what is illusion. But what I'm hearing you guys say, and what I would like to hear more of, at some point. I'm like I said at the beginning of the show, looking at these whistleblowers. They're all government, and they're all really just talking about nuts and bolts. They're not talking about the consciousness aspect of this, like the stories that we're hearing, and I think that is vital to the understanding of this phenomenon. Because when people come forward and you read the literature, when I was coming up, they called it channeling. Now they said, well, I'm getting these downloads. But when people are coming forward and telling you, when a woman says, I was pregnant, I hadn't had sex in I don't know how long, and I wind up pregnant, then I have a dream and the baby is gone. Or either I'm shown the baby in a dream. You have these stories in the Bible. Jesus is born this way, right? So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. But my point being is just that, why would these people lie? They, when you come forward, you're not going to get the good seat at the restaurant. You're not going to get the good job. You're not, if anything, you may get medicated and locked up somewhere.
Yeah.
And so these people are coming forward, and or they don't. I've been hiding this for 50 years, 60 years. So, this is not making their lives easier. So when they come forward, they need to be heard.
I think part of the challenge, Michael, is the focus, of course, is on the nuts and bolts people. The ones who are talking about developments that they're aware of or information they're privy to or locations they visited, all within a military governmental surrounding, because that's what's in place. There is no Department of Ethereal Studies. There is no government agency that deals with contact with other intelligences. But again, this military preoccupation with the hardware, with its value in terms of flexing our muscles internationally and potentially beyond, and that we have a lot of frightened people because the fear of the unknown is embodied in the mysteries of UFOs and their implications of humanity, at least, again, the more nuts and bolts UFOs. There are other explanations. We're just, focused in on the one or the several that we are this evening.
Yes. And the also a frightened populace, it's always been easier to control.
You bet. Yeah.
And so that plays into it as well.
Yeah. We have about 4 minutes left. Any thoughts that you would like to close with first, Eric, and remind us again of the specifics of the website and how folks can join us on the 8th of March in Bucks County.
Absolutely. So Bucks County Paracon, March 8th at Bucks County Community College right here in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Saturday, March 8th. They could go right to my website, ericmintelinvestigates.org, and hit the ticket link, and that'll take them right to the tickets. And I think it's $45 for the entire day with all these great speakers, great vendors, food trucks, free parking. It's a great day. So that's going to be on Saturday, March 8th. And if I could, I don't know if this is okay or not, but I have a book that people can buy too. So
yes.
And Peter, you've been so gracious. Thank you so much. It's my new book. It's Eric Mintel Casebook Investigations, right here, and it's available on Amazon. And it chronicles everything that Dominic and I have done in the last 9 years. In some of the most intriguing cases, like the Beast of Bray Road in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. And I talk about the Lady in White, UFOs over Bucks County. So there's a whole plethora of things. So thank you so much. And then anybody likes jazz, they could check out Eric Mintel Quartet.
Yes.
We've got a bunch of dates. My mentor, and if your listeners know, my mentor in jazz was Dave Brubeck, and was a great friend of mine and so much fun. So thank you so much for having us here.
Oh, absolutely. And Michael, I didn't name all of your books, but they are all available on Amazon.
On Amazon, yes.
Yes. Better yet, be ordered through anybody's local bookstore.
Yes.
Excellent. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you, Eric, in like a week and a half, sort of. Hopefully next month too. We'll be in touch on that. This is Peter Robbins. The show has been Meanwhile Here on Earth. My special guests tonight, Michael Carter and Eric Mintel. Stand up for what you believe in. Stay well, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.